like everybody has guns, and every kid is in the gang, like the nerd kids, the drama kids.
From firearms in school to relationship breakups, This American Life covers it all.
I think for the stories to work, they have to be universal.
Ira Glass hosts the weekly public radio show, which is heard by millions and has won every major broadcasting award. There is a theme for each episode and then a variety of stories around that theme, often covered with humor.
I mean, I say with pride that I think we did the single funniest hour on Guantanamo.
Ira Glass also talks to Al Jazeera about being an atheist.
You don't have to believe in God to be a Jew.
And about how he wants to be remembered.
I feel like once I'm dead, like the people of the future can just go.
Ira, welcome to Talk to Al Jazeera.
Thank you so much for having me.
So your show, This American Life, explain how it's put together, how it's divided up.
Okay, so it's an hour each week, and each week we choose some topic, and then we do different stories on the topics. And so there'll be documentary stories, there'll be interviews. Sometimes we'll have a great writer come in and do a piece, and a variety of different kinds of reporting and writing and journalism. Some of them funny, some of them more serious.
And you call each segment an act.
Yeah. We go through like sort of divided off Act 1, Act 2, Act 3.
Where did where did that come from? Is there some theatrical association or what?
It's funny, like before in the early, like the first few months of the show, we didn't have that, and I wanted some way to be able to communicate to the audience like all of this stuff is telling one story in relation to another, and that was the shorthand that was able to do it. Somehow, once we started calling it Act 1, Act 2, Act 3, the audience would then try to understand the relationship between what's happening in the third story and the one in the first, and we didn't have to say anything to do that.
You have one of the most popular broadcast shows of any kind. You get something like, what, 1 million podcasts downloaded every week? How'd you do it?
I wish I could say that we had some sort of, that I and my co-producers had some sort of like smart scheme to get podcasting audience, but we're making a show for about what amuses us, what interests us, what we're curious about. I think there's something about the show and there's something very personal about the show. Even when we take on the news, very personal.
For people who are unfamiliar with the program, what is it that you try to focus on?
It's a mix of stories about everyday life. We have, everyday people come on and we apply the tools of journalism to stories that are so personal that traditionally journalists wouldn't have handled those. And the main thing about those stories is that there's a plot, there's characters, there's funny moments, there's emotional moments. You're listening because you want to see what's going to happen. We used to try to explain the show as being like little movies for radio, but true stories generally.
And everybody who listens to the show, you feel like, wow, I can't wait, this is going someplace. And you sort of hang on because you think, wow, something different is about to happen. Is that part of the art of this, of trying to get people to listen just a little bit longer and sort of...
I mean, that's the main way I think that we're different from a lot of traditional journalism in that because don't have to be on every day, we have the luxury of really being able to find just amazing stories where there's plot twists and you can't tell what's going to happen, and we can create narrative suspense, and we can really look for. We have the luxury of being able to do journalism that's also kind of an entertainment, and we don't feel ashamed to think of it as an entertainment. Like we want it to be just like a gripping story that will unfold. So,
what is an American story? I mean, how do you define what is appropriate for the show and what is not?
That would be a really good thing for us to figure out. That's an excellent question. And we don't even think of the stories as American stories at all. I mean, I think that the name of the show, This American Life, we named it that just because it seemed like it made the thing feel big. But we don't think about whether it's an American story or not. We happen to be Americans. I think for the stories to work, they have to be universal. They have to be something that anybody can relate to, with people anybody can relate to.
In other words, stories about love or about hardship or about affection or about loss.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have a favorite that you've done over the last couple of months or last couple of years?
I mean, I have lots of favorites for different reasons. There's a guy who we had on, and he was in this long-term relationship with somebody we met and got involved with like his first week of college. And they were like the couple among their friends who, like all the other couples, they were sort of like the big bonded couple who would like nurse all the other couples when people were feeling bad. And things were going great. And at one point, they had been together for 12, 13 years, and he says to her, like, how come we're not getting married? Like, everybody around us is getting married. We're about to be 30. years old, like everybody's getting married, like why don't we get, we've never even talked about it. And she's like, well, I think I just always assumed that I would sleep with more people. Like we've been involved like basically our whole adult lives. I had one boyfriend before you. And so they decide that they're gonna go like they're gonna take a break. They're like, well, let's have a 1 month break and we'll just both sleep with other people and then we'll come back together and get married. And so they go on like a Rumspringa, you know, like they're just like, they officially call it like, we're gonna take a Rumspringa, like the Amish, you know, we're gonna take a break. And then they each like have the mission of like, okay, I'm just gonna sleep with a bunch of people, which like, of course, you know, just does not work out. Like it works out exactly like you would expect. Like, you know, just it does not go well for them.
And how has the show evolved? Because you've been doing it a long time.
I mean, the main way that the show has evolved is that the staff has gotten a lot bigger. As the show has gotten more popular, we're able to raise more money to fly people around the world and really invest money in doing stories and to really take on more serious journalism. So now we can do things that we never could have done in the early years. So last year we all became interested in all the shootings going on in Chicago. Last year 506 people were shot in a single year in the city of Chicago. And as regular news viewers know that, you know, other cities around the country, or other big cities were either stable or going down in the number of shootings, and Chicago was climbing at the time. And it wasn't really clear why, and 506 is just a huge number. New York City is 3 times larger than Chicago, and that number was larger than New York's. And we tried to look for a place to find it, and really, like, for us that means like finding characters and scenes and a place to locate it. And our senior producer Julie Snyder and some other people working together located this high school in Chicago, Harper High School. And we basically sent 3 reporters into Harper High School for 5 months to basically and Harper High School was a school in Chicago, not well known, not famous, not even the worst school in the city by far. It's just a school that gave us access where they had 29 shootings in one school year. And I can't remember if it was 8 or 9 kids died in one school. And so we felt like, well, this is a neighborhood where people know something about what it's like to live through all this kind of violence that the rest of us don't know, and we could document the kinds of trauma the kids were going through, but also document the staff was enormously competent at trying to quell the violence. And when one kid would get shot, they had all these procedures they had learned from the Army, actually, after action reports, where they would jump into action to name who all the other kids were who might be affiliated with that kid, who then might also be shot in retaliatory shootings. And so you could watch, you know, this school try to deal with this thing. And so something like that, where we would go in for so long with such manpower, I mean, for any kind of journalistic organization.
It's a huge investment.
We did 2 hours because we felt like we saw so much stuff that was so surprising to us. Gang structure turns out to have changed in Chicago in the last 10 or 15 years in a way where gangs were nothing like what they had been 15 years ago. Even the adults in the neighborhood don't know. Like, gangs in that neighborhood, because gangs in the neighborhood aren't mostly criminal enterprises. It's not like On the Wire where they're selling drugs and all that. It's just basically teenagers, like your high school clique, but you can get guns so easily, like everybody has guns, and every kid is in the gang, like the nerd kids, the drama kids, every kid is in a gang because you need a gang to be able to walk to school through the neighborhood.
On the other side of this break, we're going to talk with Ira Glass, the host and executive producer of This American Life, about his own background and how that shaped what he's doing today, after this. And we're back on Talk to Al Jazeera with Ira Glass, host and executive producer of This American Life. You grew up in Baltimore. There's no Maryland accent, though.
Oh, I got rid of it. I had it when I was a kid, for sure. And I moved to the Midwest for college and was mocked all the time for saying water instead of water. And I got it out of my... What
was it like growing up in Baltimore, in Charm City?
I mean, I grew up in the suburbs, and so I think it was like very typical of a lot of people who grew up in the suburbs. I mean, I happened to grow up in an unbelievably Jewish suburb, and I don't think I realized as a child just how eccentric that was. Baltimore County has just a huge Jewish population, and so it was more of an ethnic enclave than I realized. Like at my elementary school, almost nobody celebrated Christmas. which I was just like, I got to be older, I realized like that was really unusual that like nobody celebrated Christmas. Like, yeah.
And but now you're an atheist. So the Jewish
Yes.
upbringing, it's more sort of a cultural identity, not a
Yes,
spiritual
like many
connection.
Jews, like you don't have to believe in God to be a Jew. Yeah, you are whether you choose to be or not. And I went to Hebrew school and all the way up to the 10th or 11th grade. After
You had a bar
public
mitzvah
school.
and the whole thing.
I had a bar mitzvah, the whole thing, and at some point just felt like I found that I didn't believe in God. And periodically I'll do stories on evangelical Christians, and when I get along with them, as often I do, like at some point they'll be like, well, don't you think there's a reason that you were drawn to come and do this story? Don't you think there's a reason why we're meeting each other? And they'll try to sell me on believing in God again. And I always feel like I wish I could kind of go there, but I don't.
Your parents, they always wanted you to be a doctor.
Yes.
At what point did they finally say, okay, he's doing pretty well in his career, we can let go of the doctor stuff?
Yeah, I was in my late 30s before, maybe even my 40s. Actually, I was in my early 40s before my parents actually stopped saying you should still think about medical school. My parents, I mean, I've said this publicly and it upsets my dad, but it's true. My parents are the only Jews in America who don't like public broadcasting and don't listen to public radio.
How come?
It just wasn't their thing. I mean, I feel like they've come around now. My dad has come around now. I mean, they tried to be supportive parents with what I was doing, but they would let me know, like, we think you're making a mistake. Like, you should be a doctor. You're never going to make any money. Like, why? And if you're going to be in broadcasting, if you're going to be a journalist, why be on the radio? Like, why not like grab for the brass ring? Why not be on TV? Why not have your job? And I don't think they got it for a long time. And then it's interesting, when I started this show, when I started This American Life, I used to have them on all the time in the early years.
For your fans, when we talk to people who listen to you on a regular basis, they say, love Ira Glass. There's something about him that's really sort of quirky in an endearing way. Is that fair?
I mean, I don't know. Like, the word quirky, I feel like, is not the word that I would choose. Like, quirky, I feel like implies that like you're a little gnome or something like this adorable little elf.
Well, let me give you an example. You studied semiotics in college.
Yes.
A lot of people don't know what semiotics is. It's what the study of symbol and communications.
Yes.
That's not your sort of traditional literature, science, and the arts kind of background.
No, it's not your traditional journalism background either. No, and by the time when I started working at NPR in Washington, I was working on the news when I was 19, so I was working for the network news, on their afternoon news show, All Things Considered, when I was 19 and 20 and 21. And then I was going back to college and I was studying semiotics, like you say, which is this incredibly pretentious body of French literary theory. But it actually turns out to be just enormously useful in my daily job, because what it's about is it's about how narrative works. It's about how to structure a story so that it will be compelling and get its hooks into you. And semiotics is really interested in questions like, what keeps you watching something? What keeps you, what keeps you listening to a story on the radio? Like, what keeps you, what is engaged? What keeps you turning the pages in a book? Like, why? Like, what's the pleasure of it that's moving you forward? That's pulling you in and grabbing you and pulling you forward. And then, the feeling at the end of a really great story. Like, if a story is working, like if a really great episode of TV, a really great movie, a really great book, like that feeling you get of like what semiotics is all about is like, what is producing that? Like, what's the machinery that produces that? And when it doesn't happen, what has failed? So studying that honestly gave me tools that I use every day in my job. I think I wouldn't be able to do my job.
There's also a certain skill involved in broadcasting that has to be developed. I think all of us who have been in broadcasting remember those early days when, frankly, we sucked. Did you have that time period, and do you ever go back and look at your old clips and think, or listen to your old clips and think, wow, I was really doing that?
Yes, I have. Yeah, because partly because I end up like doing little teaching gigs with people who are coming up, and it's a pleasure to be able to play clips of how bad I was, not in my second or third or fourth year, but even in my sixth and seventh year. Like, I was just a terrible performer, a terrible writer. It's like you just think like, well, it'll be like in the movies where you just have talent and you just like, you're gonna go out there and you'll be great from the beginning. But in fact, most of us are really bad for a really long time, and nobody tells you like that's a normal thing, and you have to fight your way through that. And like my early clips are awful. Like, you know, I have years of being awful. And so and to be fair to my parents, like I understand why they were saying, like, in retrospect, like, what are you doing? Because it was not that good. Like, I was not that good. And there were things that I was always had a natural aptitude for. I feel like my first skill was I was a decent editor, like from the very beginning. Everything else I was terrible at.
Including writing. You didn't like writing, and to this day, you don't like to write.
Oh, I don't. Oh, I like to write now.
You like to write now?
Yeah. Now that I know what I'm doing, it's knowing what you're doing makes it a pleasure. Like, you know, I procrastinate like anybody normal.
You procrastinate.
Yeah, though I'm so busy. Like, procrastinating means just like I work on another part of the business, or I edit somebody else's story, and yeah. But like right now, as you and I are sitting here, I should be writing a story that I have to finish a draft of by Monday.
So we're serving as a procrastination tool for
You
Ira
are.
Glass.
That is exactly right. Yeah, and I appreciate it. I thank you. I thank you.
Is there anything about your sort of background, your experience growing up in Baltimore, studying semiotics in college, that gave you a sense of irony or a sense of humor that plays a role in what you do?
I mean, I think, you know, I think for the kinds of stories we're doing, it's important that things be funny. You know, I think, you know, I grew up around people who are funny. My parents are really funny. I think that what we're doing on our show, we're consciously trying to make a new kind of journalism where we want it to be more compelling. Like, we've looked at what other people do, and like we're just like, what can we do to make this more gripping? And I feel like, you know, like people, and we live in a world where there's like a tremendous number of very, very good journalists, you know, but what can we do that would be distinctive? And the things that we're doing that we're trying to be different and trying to set ourselves apart are, you know, like a lot of journalists obviously have stories with scenes and characters and emotional moments. I mean, and I think we do that, but push it about as far as you can go. And then we talk in a conversational sort of tone. And obviously a lot of broadcasters, if they're very good, you know, talk in a conversational tone. But I feel like with us, it's even more so. Like, we really do talk like we really talk when we're off camera or off mic, when we're on camera and on mic. And then the last thing is, like, one of the last elements is that we try to be funny in serious stories, which is very, very rare in broadcast journalism still. And one of the things I always find very interesting is that, like, when you meet broadcast journalists, almost always, it's very, very common, like, they're super funny people off camera, but the format that they're in doesn't have the space for them to be that person on camera. I mean, we did an hour on Guantanamo that is, you know, where we went in with a very mission-y sense of we're trying to achieve all sorts of things, and there were people at that point when we did our hour on Guantanamo. I can't remember, 200, 300 people had been released from Guantanamo already. The U.S. had you know, interrogated these guys and decided, oh, you actually never were a threat to the United States. It was a mistake to pick you up. And we realized that like 200, 300 people like that had been released. This is years ago. And nobody had ever interviewed them in American journalism, like in American broadcast journalism. Like, they hadn't been on TV, they hadn't been on radio. We couldn't find anybody had interviewed them. We're just like, well, we could do that. Like, we could interview them. And so we started to track them down and got translators, sent people to other countries, and tried to get people to just get them on the air and tell, like, what happened to you? Like, what happened to you? How were you treated? How are you feeling about America? Are you going to, like, you know, you want to kill us all now? Like, how are you feeling about that experience? Just ask the normal things that any reporter would ask. But the packaging of that show, I have to say, it's, you know, I feel like we thought, like, people don't want to hear an hour about Guantanamo generally. Like, you know, I feel like I'm super interested in it, but even if there was like a big headline at the beginning, like Guantanamo, an hour, like, you just think like, oh no, like, that's so going to be so heavy. I already have an opinion about it. I know what I think. And I feel like I think it's incumbent on all of us, and we all broadcasters, you know, you have to be cunning about how do you even bring this up in a way that people want to watch the second minute of your show. And I feel like partly because it's radio, we can back into it and we could just kind of start a story going, and then before you know it, it's going to turn out to be about Guantanamo. And we feel very conscious of all the things that will make people go like, no, I don't want to hear that. And try to really back people into stories so that then before they know it, we're actually able to present something new that they haven't heard about, something, you know, that would be hopefully interesting to them to hear. then as part of that, we want to use humor as much as we can. I mean, I say with pride that I think we did the single funniest hour on Guantanamo that any broadcasters have done. And it sounds like glib and stupid, but I feel like that, I think, is necessary. Like, it's a really funny show, but also dark and serious, and also presenting an analysis that at that point wasn't out there quite so much in the press. And you know, and I would say to people who normally watch, Al Jazeera, like, in the mix of things that people are watching for the news, I feel like we're just trying something new. We're trying to invent something new.
Well, so many Americans listen to Ira Glass, and on the other side of this break, we will ask him who he listens to and what programs he follows. Back after this on Talk to Al Jazeera. And we're back on Talk to Al Jazeera with Ira Glass. Do you ever listen to Howard Stern?
I love Howard Stern.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love Howard Stern. Yeah.
Just because of how he uses the format, or because of his sense of humor?
Everything. That's a beautifully crafted radio show where the design of the show is beautiful, and anybody who if you think about what it is, there's him and there's a bunch of characters who you come to know and love. I think people who don't listen to Howard Stern have a misimpression of what the show is. Partly because of his own marketing of the show, because he tries to, when he goes and publicizes it, he talks about, girls coming in and taking off their tops, which is there. But I'm as hardcore fans, that's kind of the least interesting part of the show.
What other shows or broadcasts or news sources do you follow?
There's a whole set of public radio shows that I'm a big fan of, including especially Fresh Air and Radio Lab and On the Media and the daily news shows, which are a big news source for me. And then beyond that, I read the New York Times.
I got to ask you something that you talked about regarding your dog.
Yes.
You said that your pit bull, that through your pit bull you learned that you respond to neediness and vulnerability more than shows of affection.
Did I say that?
Yeah, you said that.
On the radio?
I believe in one of your speeches.
Really, I respond to neediness and vulnerability more than shows of affection. Yeah.
Your dog is
true.
Needy, vulnerable, and there's
Yes.
something about that.
He's also affectionate. He's a normal dog, but yeah, no, he's I have this dog who's a rescue, who's kind of a problem dog, and an anxious dog, born in circumstances that left him anxious his whole life, and I do respond to his vulnerability. I think it's really true, and it breaks my heart, and my heart goes out to him, seeing the troubled way he has in the world, more than when he licks my face. That is true. Yes.
Some of the things you did to keep the dog alive include changing its food every 6 months, worrying about its allergies, everything else.
Yes, we have done that. And I think the problem in saying that publicly is that you just come off as a crazy, rich person, that you would be, spending that kind of money on your dog. I think it put a lot of people off. Yeah,
but there's some validity to it, isn't there?
Well, not the rich part. Crazy part, sure, I embrace.
I got to ask you about, finally, legacy. Is there a legacy that you think that when the story of Ira Glass is written, and it won't be written by you because you're not going to write a book, I understand. What do you think the takeaway would be, or what would you want it to be?
Oh, I don't even care. I honestly don't care. I don't care about legacy. I could care less. I feel like once I'm dead, the people of the future can just go f themselves. People who are around after we're dead, good luck to them. I hate those people. People who are around after we're dead, just, walking around and we don't even exist.
Ira Glass, thank you so much for being on Talk to Al Jazeera. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.